I was fortunate enough to play Two Point Museum a week before the release. Thank you to Sega for the early key, and it is time for another episode of Mole Thoughts. And I have to come clean to you immediately. When Two Point Campus came out, I was not really convinced by it. For me, it was basically just a reskin of Two Point Hospital, but with a campus. Like, you literally did the same thing. You had people coming in, which had issues, aka no education, while in Two Point Hospital, you had people which were sick. So you needed to build the rooms the people demanded, then they were going into the rooms, get educated or healed, and then they would leave your building. End of story. And for me, as I said, Two Point Campus was basically just a reskin of Two Point Hospital with a different idea behind it. Now, when I was going into Two Point Museum, I was still fearing that that would be the case again. Now, the good news is it's not. It's a very, very different game, and I would go even so far to say it is the best 2 point game yet. But let's talk about the beginning. At the start of the game, you have finally the option to choose immediately the sandbox mode if you are not interested into the campaign. Yes, you can now directly go into that. They have listened to the community. You have tons of options and all the maps available. You can unlock everything if you want to, and then you can just change the difficulty to your heart's content and what you desire. I would not recommend that though, because the game has changed significantly. Even for the people who have played quite a bit of the other 2 point games, please play the campaign because they are still functioning as a sort of tutorial to teach you all the new changes, but they streamlined the whole thing. There are less places you are visiting now. It's not like the other 2 point games where you had like 15 or 20 missions. Now it's I think it's 5 and then some side missions you can do. And the good thing is that you are even going back to the other places. So you are never really done fully with a museum, but depending on the progression of the story, you will go back, use some of the new tricks you have learned, and upgrade your museum you have built before, which is fantastic, right? Because in the previous campaign, it was always like a done and done deal. And you were kind of like, oh man, but I built such a good campus, such a good hospital, and now I have to leave that behind. Well, that's not the case anymore. As I said, you will come back to those different museums over time. But let's talk about another big new thing, the building. Now, the building is still there, right? You are still building your museum. And but this time they have moved a little bit away from the whole room setup, right? In the previous 2 point games, you were always just building rooms, fill them up with the items you need, and then you would move on to the next thing. Now, in 2 point Museum, you have a whole museum, and yes, you can still build rooms, and there are still rooms you need, like the break room for your people working there, or toilets and something like that, right? And you can still build technically rooms for your museum's exhibitions. Now, you don't have to, right? That is a suggestion with the exhibitions. You still have to do that for the toilets and all. You cannot just dump them in your museum. Like, they need rooms. But it is now much more open, and you really want to make it fluid, right? There is now a flow to your museum, and you want that people basically go through it, seeing as much as possible and spending as much time as possible, because the money flow is also important. And we will talk about money here in just a second. But again, you are now trying to build a flow in your museum, and rooms are not necessarily always the best choice for that. Also, you're coming back to your rooms. Like, even if you create rooms, you will see it here in my video also that I'm like editing some stuff because I have to, because you are getting new things. You get new items which you can beautify the rooms, which are now very, very important. In the previous games, it was always just like, do I want to put that much stuff in the room? I mean, yeah, sure, people will like it a little bit more, but does it really help that much? And in 2 point Museum, it's now more or less mandatory, right? Like, You will even have moments where certain exhibitions need certain items to get the most out of them, the most buzz. Buzz is the currency which is getting in new people, right? They're talking about it, and it's like, hey, have you heard? There's a new item in the museum. We should check it out, right? And then they're coming in. So you really try to beautify your museum as much as possible and really make it look good, not just for yourself, because you love to do that kind of stuff, but also really because it helps the museum. And as I said, it helps with the money flow. Let's talk about money. Money in the 2 Point games has always been a side thing, right? You never really thought about money. After a few hours, the money would just rain in, and it was never a problem. 2 Point Museum, different story. It is still like for people who have probably then hundreds of hours in this game, it will still be probably relatively easy to make money. But especially at the beginning, I struggled more often or not to actually have a money flow coming in because yes, you are making money from the ticket price, but now you have tons of small things which will create money. You have donations, you have tours, you have different stations and items where people can spend money on. And you really try to guide the people not just to the museum pieces, but also to all the things which will make you money. And if you don't do that, you will run out of money quick. Like running a museum is freaking expensive. So yeah, there were moments where I was actually struggling for the money income, which was really interesting coming from the other 2 Point games. But you have also noticed that I talk about exhibitions. Let's talk about the other museums first, though, and then we talk about how to get expositions, and expeditions. So many X's. And let's talk about the museums first, though. So what you're seeing here is your standard museum, I would say, right? Where I have a museum for botany a little bit in the corner. You probably have already seen in the video. And this is mostly a prehistoric museum. But there are other museums out there. Two of them I want to show here because I don't want to spoiler too much. One of them is the Supernatural Museum, and this is where you are working with cursed objects and ghosts, and it plays a bit like a hotel. I know this sounds weird, but the ghosts have demands. So you will capture ghosts and they will live in your museum, right? They will live in specific designed rooms and they all have wants and needs. They want certain items, they don't want certain items, and you have to split up the ghosts in different rooms to make them not get angry. If they get angry, they break out. And that's not what you want. Because, believe it or not, people like to watch ghosts in a safe environment, but having a ghost right behind them, or possess them even, is not something people like, and that is not good for your museum. But that is a completely different play style than the prehistoric museum, right? And then we have also the museum for aquatic beings and water stuff, right? And this is where you have to take care of artifacts you found underwater, but also fish. You capture fish, and they all have, again, their wants and needs. They need different environments you have to look out for. And it really adds to this, oh, this is different, this is new and exciting, and you will even start to mix those things together. So you will not just have specific museums, but you will start to mix those different museums together, which is also putting a lot of work on you. In general, what I really love about 2 Point Museum is there's always something to do. You never have to slow down like in the other 2 Point games where you were sometimes just sitting there for 10, 20 minutes doing nothing, speeding up the game as fast as possible just so you can do something again. You don't have that here too often. There are still some smaller moments here and there where you can just take your time, look at your museum, but most of the time you are working, you are doing stuff, which is fantastic. And now let's talk about the exhibitions and how this works, because you have to send out expeditions. And you do that, well, when they're coming back, you see this here, I'm opening a crate, and that crate has an item in it. But to start all of this, you have to go to the expeditions map, and then you have different point of interests you can visit, and they all have different requirements, right? They have all different characters you have to take with them. The characters need to have certain perks. You also can send different items, and then you will see on the right side there are different events which can trigger positive and negative. And sometimes you will have actually decisions you have to make while you're on an expedition. And then you have to make a decision which will be positive or negative, depending on what you choose. And then you will get a random item which you can find on this point of interest at the end of the expedition. And now you might think, okay, so I'm just grabbing all the items which are at the point of expedition, yeah, at the point of interest in an expedition. So many X's, and then I will never show up there again, right? I'm done and done. No, you are not, because all the items can have different rarities, and the rarer the better. They start at average, then they're rare, then they're epic, and then they're like legendary, right? And even if you have the highest one, you can actually take the other items, dismantle them, and gain knowledge, enlightenment. Enlightenment points is a new currency which will not just help you to understand the item better and give the people who are looking at it more knowledge, which they want, but also it will unlock new items for you can then put in your museum. So you want to go back as much as often to those points to gather all the items, right? There's always something to do. Be careful though, expeditions, they become expensive. They become really, really expensive. But in general, I have to say, 2 Point Museum, definitely the best 2 Point game I have played. I have really enjoyed it in the week I have played it, and it's just great. It's a really good management game where you now have to manage your money, your items better. There is a flow to it. Like, they have just absolutely nailed it this time. And it is so different from the previous 2 Point games, which was my biggest fear. So if you were on the fence on that, well, you have seen the review, right? You know what you are now getting yourself into. And if that piques your interest, early access is now live, and the game is coming out regularly and in a few days. And I highly recommend it because I will now go back playing more 2 Point Museum. With that said, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like. And also, if you're new to the channel, you want to see more reviews and strategy games and management games in general, I would appreciate if you also might consider to subscribe. With that said, thank you so much for watching. Stay safe. Bye-bye.